I always felt a bit uneasy about selling items online. But a few years back, when I needed to get rid of my daughter's college belongings, including a microwave, I had no choice but to list them on Craigslist. I positioned the microwave in my driveway to prevent strangers from entering my house, hoping it would deter any potential creepiness. At one point, a man, he sounded young, called inquiring about the microwave. I seriously wanted someone to pick it up, but he said he was taking care of his sick father and couldn't leave him but really needed the microwave. He told me where he lived, which really wasn't very far from me. An apartment building in a side of town that was relatively safe, so I agreed to take it to him. Upon arriving to the building, he asked if I could bring it up. I said no, it was too heavy. He said he could not leave the apartment, I was going to have to bring it up. Well, at this stage I just wanted my money and to leave, so I agreed to that. There I went hauling it up a flight of stairs. Luckily it wasn't one of the very large ones. But still it was an inconvenience to me. Once I got to his apartment door, I saw him, a man in his mid to late 30s, standing there with shorts and a muscle shirt on. Behind him were lots of barbells and weights for bodybuilding. He was in magnificent shape with huge muscles. He said, "Ayo, please set it down here," motioning to the kitchen counter. Okay, that required I enter the room, which immediately I felt uncomfortable. He then proceeded to inform me that actually he couldn't come for the microwave because he was on house arrest after serving 15 years in prison. I had parked beyond his permitted perimeters and he couldn't make it out to my car. All I felt was every ounce of blood run out of my body at that moment, or so it seemed that way. He was alone. There was no one there he was caring for. He just lied to me about that to get me up here, and now I'm alone in an apartment with a felon right out of prison who could snap my neck like a twig if he should even think about it. I mumbled something like, "Oh, okay, well, here you go, delivered." Slowly inching my way toward the door, he said, "Hold on. Let me get your money," and went to the other room just quick enough to retrieve the money. I almost ran out but had a strange feeling that I shouldn't do that, just remain calm and act like all is okay and leave ASAP. He handed me the money, then started to chit-chat a bit. I listened for a sec and got to the door somehow. When I turned to leave, he quickly said, "Yo, it won't turn on. How do you work it? Can you show me?" So I had to turn around and go back in, terrified but trying not to look terrified. Somehow I kept my cool and said, "Oh, you just press this and that," and to my great relief it came on, and he chuckled, saying he was not good with appliances. Okay, so he was being nice, but something just felt off. I made it back to the door and almost ran to the stairs, but forced myself to walk slow as not to alarm him. I felt like if I did it would make him mad. I heard an uncomfortable laugh behind me. I didn't turn around to engage, I just kept walking down those stairs till I was at the bottom and could breathe again. I soon saw other people and felt better. What was I thinking? I couldn't believe I had placed myself in that position. Sure, he didn't do anything physical to me, but he did lie to get me there. What else was he capable of? When I think of all the possible scenarios that could have gone down had I not been cool-headed, I think he may have attacked me, and who would know? Not a soul. I hadn't told anyone from home where I was going. Yes, I'd be missed, and probably for days, maybe even months before found, if ever. To this day I still get this scared feeling in my gut just thinking about what could have happened to me if I had been taken by surprise while alone with this man. Never again. Never again. Selling items online always made me uneasy, but when I needed to get rid of my long extension ladder, I had no choice but to list it on Craigslist. I positioned it in my driveway to avoid strangers coming into my house, hoping it would deter any potential creepiness. One evening, a buyer arrived, expressing interest in the ladder. Everything seemed normal at first, but as he attempted to extend it, the ladder jammed. His request for a mallet sent shivers down my spine, but I reluctantly obliged, gesturing toward the garage before retreating into the basement to retrieve it. The basement, dimly lit and cluttered with forgotten items, felt like a different world. As I fumbled through the shelves, a sense of dread washed over me. When I finally found the mallet and turned around, there he stood, looming in the shadows, closer than he should have been. My heart raced as a wave of panic crashed over me. This is where I die, I thought, my grip tightening on the mallet. Summoning all my courage, I demanded he follow me back outside, into the safety of the driveway. Relief flooded over me as we emerged from the darkness, but the fear lingered like a shadow. With trembling hands, he banged the mallet against the ladder, and to my surprise, it opened with a metallic groan. His payment felt like blood money as I watched him haul the ladder away, disappearing into the night. The encounter left me shaken to the core. I vowed never to sell anything from my house again, haunted by the chilling reminder of how easily danger can lurk behind the facade of a simple transaction. When I moved to Los Angeles a couple of years back, I found myself in need of a vacuum cleaner. Being on a tight budget, I scoured Craigslist for a good deal and stumbled upon one that seemed too good to pass up. The ad was for a vacuum in good condition, offered at a fraction of its retail price. I dialed the number listed and a woman's voice answered. She provided me with cross streets and instructed me to call again once I arrived. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at that point, so I hopped into my car and headed to the address. The directions led me to a neighborhood that seemed ordinary enough, but as I approached the designated area, a feeling of unease began to creep over me. The streets were eerily quiet, with only the distant hum of traffic breaking the silence. When I called the number again upon arrival, a man answered this time. I asked for Jennifer, the woman I spoke to earlier, but he claimed she wasn't available. Alarm bells started ringing in my head, but before I could react, he instructed me to drive to the back where he would open the gate for me. Reluctantly, I followed his directions, pulling up to a massive blue building with a gated area guarded by security. As the gate slowly creaked open, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Parking my car, I stepped out and was greeted by the man from the phone call. His demeanor was unnervingly calm as he led me into the depths of the building. Descending a set of stairs, we entered a vast, dimly lit warehouse that seemed to stretch on for miles. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay, and the sound of our footsteps echoed ominously against the walls. Rows upon rows of old machinery and forgotten artifacts filled the space, casting eerie shadows in every direction. My heart pounded in my chest as we navigated through the maze of ancient relics. The man led me deeper into the warehouse until we finally reached a secluded corner where the vacuum awaited. Grabbing it hastily, I asked about payment, only to be directed to another person upstairs. Climbing back into the unknown, I found myself face to face with another figure clad in the same uniform as the man before. As she took my payment information, I couldn't help but ask where we were. Her response sent shivers down my spine. "You're in the Church of Scientology." A chill ran down my spine as the realization sunk in. Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of the situation. Hastily completing the transaction, I made a beeline for the exit, desperate to escape the clutches of this strange and unsettling place. Emerging into the daylight, I breathed a sigh of relief, vowing never to venture into the unknown alone again. The memory of that harrowing experience would stay with me for years to come, serving as a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows. And as for the vacuum? Well, it may have been a great deal, but the price I paid was far greater than I ever could have imagined. In the quiet solitude of my apartment, I sat surrounded by the musty scent of old books. It had been a habit of mine to browse Craigslist for second-hand treasures, and that day's find was a box of novels at a bargain price. With anticipation, I began sifting through the stack, the soft rustle of pages filling the room. Nestled between the worn covers, a slip of paper had caught my eye. I reached for it, my fingers brushing against its delicate surface. As I unfolded it, a photograph slipped out, fluttering gently to the floor. I leaned down to retrieve it, curiosity piqued. The image that had greeted me had been unsettling, a person's face, their eyes wide with fear, staring back at me from the glossy paper. Below the photograph, in bold, black letters, were the words, "Missing person." A shiver had run down my spine as I examined the details of the flyer. The date of disappearance, the contact information for the authorities, it had all been there, hauntingly real. My mind had raced with questions. How had this photograph ended up in the pages of a book I had bought on Craigslist? And what had been the connection between the seller and this missing individual? I had glanced around my apartment, suddenly feeling a sense of unease. The once familiar space had seemed tinged with an air of mystery, the shadows dancing ominously in the dim light. Unable to shake the feeling of dread, I had returned my attention to the books spread out before me. With trembling hands, I had continued to flip through the pages, my heart pounding in my chest. As I had turned the pages of one particularly weathered novel, something had slipped out and fallen to the floor with a soft thud. I had reached down to pick it up, my breath catching in my throat. It had been another photograph, a different person this time, their expression mirroring the fear I had seen in the first. My pulse had quickened as I had scanned the flyer beneath it, confirming my worst fears. Another missing person, another connection to the books I had purchased. Panic had begun to rise within me as I had realized the gravity of the situation. What if these photographs had been more than just a coincidence? What if they had been pieces of a larger puzzle, one that I had unwittingly stumbled upon? I had frantically searched through the remaining books, each one yielding more of the same, photographs of missing persons, their faces frozen in time, their fates uncertain. Desperation had clawed at me as I had tried to make sense of it all. Had the seller been involved in their disappearances? Were these books somehow linked to a larger conspiracy? My thoughts had spiraled into a dark abyss as I had grappled with the possibilities. The once innocuous act of buying books on Craigslist had led me down a rabbit hole of uncertainty, and I had feared that I may never find my way out. With a heavy heart, I had gathered up the photographs and flyers, tucking them away as evidence of the eerie discovery. I had known that I had to alert the authorities, to do whatever I could to help bring closure to the families of the missing. But as I had reached for my phone, a sudden chill had swept over me. What if the person behind these disappearances had still been out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to silence anyone who uncovered their secrets? The thought had sent a shiver down my spine, but I had known that I couldn't let fear paralyze me. With determination, I had dialed the number for the local police department, my voice steady as I had recounted the bizarre series of events that had unfolded. As I had waited for help to arrive, I hadn't been able to shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. And as the sound of approaching sirens had filled the air, I had known that my life would never be the same again. As I settled into my tiny studio apartment amidst the chaos of my unraveling life, I knew I had to downsize and fast. The punching bag, once a symbol of resolve and stress relief, had become an ominous presence, dominating what little space I had left. Its weight seemed to bear down on me, a constant reminder of the turmoil within and without. I made the decision to part with it, turning to Craigslist in the hopes of finding it a new home. Within hours, I received a call from a woman in her 30s, her voice brisk and efficient. She arranged to come by with her daughter to pick up the punching bag that very afternoon. When they arrived, I was taken aback by the intensity of the daughter's gaze. Her eyes, a piercing blue, seemed to bore into my soul, leaving me feeling exposed and vulnerable. She stood silently beside her mother, a shadowy figure in the dimly lit hallway. As we completed the transaction, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the pair. There was an air of secrecy surrounding them, a hidden darkness lurking just beneath the surface. When I asked about the intended recipient of the punching bag, the mother's response was cryptic, leaving me with more questions than answers. "It's for her," she said simply, gesturing towards her daughter. And then, as if on cue, the daughter spoke, her voice barely a whisper, but filled with a chilling intensity. "I have anger management issues," she confessed, her words sending a shiver down my spine. As they left, the weight of their presence lingered in the air, casting a pall over the once familiar surroundings of my apartment. I couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay hidden behind those piercing blue eyes, and what darkness awaited them in the depths of the night. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. The memory of those haunting eyes haunted my dreams, leaving me restless and on edge. And as the darkness closed in around me, I couldn't help but feel as though I was being watched, as though something sinister lurked just beyond the edges of my vision, waiting to pounce. A woman offered a beautiful dress for an unbelievably low price, and despite a nagging feeling of unease, I couldn't resist the bargain. We arranged to meet at her house, which turned out to be a rundown and dilapidated structure, hidden away in the darkest corner of the neighborhood. As I approached the door, the smell of cigarettes, cat urine, and decay assaulted my senses. I was greeted by a disheveled woman with hollow eyes, her voice raspy from years of chain smoking. Reluctantly, I followed her inside, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. She insisted I sit down, but every instinct screamed at me to stay standing. I forced a polite smile and declined, eager to get this over with as quickly as possible. My heart raced as I prayed she would just hand over the dress and let me leave. Finally, she returned with the dress, but what she presented was nothing like the pristine garment in the photo. It was a tattered, stained mess, emanating an unsettling odor that made my stomach churn. Despite my revulsion, I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. That's when she began to speak, her voice low and haunted as she recounted a chilling tale of loss and sorrow. She claimed the dress had been worn only once to her daughter's funeral. As she showed me a faded photograph of the young girl, a sense of dread washed over me, chilling me to the bone. But as I reached for the dress, I felt a cold hand grip my wrist, sending a shock of terror through my body. The woman's eyes gleamed with an otherworldly intensity as she whispered, "She's still here, you know. She never left." In that moment, I knew I had stumbled into something far more sinister than I could have imagined. With a trembling hand, I handed over the money and fled from the house, the echoes of the woman's eerie laughter echoing in my ears. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me like a shroud. And as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I could swear I saw a ghostly figure standing in the window, watching me with eyes that burned with a hunger that chilled me to the bone. In the end, I realized that some bargains come at a price far greater than we could ever imagine. And as I tossed the dress into the nearest dumpster, I made a silent vow never to trust a deal that seemed too good to be true ever again. As I stood at the local talent show, mesmerized by the performances, one person caught my attention, Jake. He exuded an enigmatic charm, his presence commanding the stage with an effortless grace that left the audience spellbound. After the show, I approached Jake, drawn in by his magnetic aura. We struck up a conversation, and I quickly realized there was more to him than met the eye. He had a depth to him, a complexity that intrigued me. As we talked, I couldn't help but notice the weariness in Jake's eyes, a hint of sadness that lingered beneath his confident facade. It was as if he carried a burden, a weight that he couldn't shake off. Curiosity piqued, I delved deeper into Jake's past, eager to unravel the mystery that surrounded him. He spoke of his time in California, a journey marked by hardship and struggle. But it wasn't the glitz and glamour of Hollywood that drew him there, it was a desperate attempt to escape the suffocating grasp of his past. Jake recounted the days he spent wandering the streets of San Francisco, a lone figure lost in the sea of humanity. He spoke of the nights spent huddled in doorways, the bitter cold biting into his bones as he fought to survive another day. It was during one of these nights that Jake stumbled upon a Craigslist ad that would change his life forever. Desperate for money, he answered the call of a mysterious stranger offering cash in exchange for a simple massage. What began as a simple transaction soon descended into a nightmare of unspeakable horrors. The stranger's touch was cold and clammy, his hands moving with an eerie precision that sent shivers down Jake's spine. As the massage progressed, Jake felt a creeping sense of unease wash over him, a primal instinct warning him of the danger that lurked in the shadows. But it was too late, the trap had already been set, and Jake found himself ensnared in a web of darkness from which there was no escape. Haunted by the memory of that fateful night, Jake fled back to Minnesota, the echoes of his ordeal haunting him every step of the way. But try as he might, he could never truly outrun the demons that lurked within his own mind. Now, years later, Jake may seem like a changed man, his past a distant memory buried beneath the veneer of normalcy. But I can't help but wonder what secrets lie hidden beneath his calm exterior, what darkness still lurks within the recesses of his soul. As I scroll through his Facebook feed, I can't shake the feeling that Jake's story is far from over, that the horrors of his past are merely biding their time, waiting to resurface when he least expects it.